You have noticed something shifting. The person who once consumed your thoughts, who dominated your emotional landscape, who seemed to hold power over your peace, they are behaving differently now. Not with remorse, not with quiet acceptance. Their reactions reveal something you already know deep in your spirit. You have won. If you are listening to this, you have walked through fire. You have questioned your sanity. You have wondered if you were the problem. You have replayed conversations at 3 a.m, analyzing every word, every tone, every subtle dismissal. You have prayed for clarity. You have begged God to show you the truth. And somewhere along that difficult journey, something changed. Not in them, in you. Today, we are going to walk through the unmistakable signs that appear when you have truly defeated someone whose spirit operates through manipulation, deceit, and control. These are not just behavioral patterns. They are spiritual indicators, evidence that you have disrupted a force that thrived in hidden places, that fed on your confusion, that grew strong in the shadows of your self-doubt. When light enters those dark spaces, when truth displaces deception, when you reclaim the power you never knew, you had given away their reactions. Tell a story you need to hear, a story that will confirm what your spirit already knows. As we explore each sign together, you will recognize moments from your own journey. Some may sting with familiarity. Some may bring unexpected relief. All of them will validate what you have lived through and what you have overcome. Because freedom is not just a feeling, it is evidenced by specific observable changes in how they respond to your existence, your boundaries, your growth, and your peace. You are not imagining this. You are not being dramatic. What you are witnessing is the collapse of a system that depended entirely on your participation. And the most beautiful part, you no longer need their acknowledgement to know you have won. The victory is already yours. Let us begin with the first sign, and it appears almost immediately, an obsession with proving you wrong. Not simple disagreement, not healthy debate. This is an all-consuming mission to dismantle your credibility, discredit your character, and invalidate your lived experience. Every statement you make becomes a target. Every boundary you set becomes a challenge they must defeat. Every truth you speak becomes a lie they must expose. Imagine this. You're at a family gathering. The conversation turns to current events. You mention something you read, something factual, something neutral. There is a pause. Not the pause of consideration, but the pause of someone searching for ammunition. Then it comes. A dismissive laugh, a condescending correction, a lecture about how you clearly did not understand what you read. The facts do not matter. Your accuracy is irrelevant. What matters to them is that you spoke, and they cannot let that stand unchallenged. Or perhaps it happens differently for you. You set a boundary, a simple one. I need you to call before you come over. I will not discuss this topic anymore. I am not available that day. The response is immediate and disproportionate. They do not simply disagree. They build a case. They gather evidence. They recruit witnesses. They create elaborate arguments about why your boundary is unreasonable, selfish, controlling. They need you to be wrong because your rightness threatens the very foundation of their identity. At the core of this obsession lies a fragile ego that cannot withstand your independence. For someone whose entire sense of self rests on being superior, your competence becomes an existential threat. They built their identity on a foundation of comparison. They are only smart if you are stupid. They are only right if you are wrong. They are only worthy if you are worthless. Your clarity, your boundaries, your simple act of stating truth, these things shatter the delusion they have spent years constructing. And so they fight, not for truth, for survival. Scripture speaks directly to this desperate need to be right at all costs. In Proverbs chapter 13, verse 10, we read, "Pride only breeds quarrels, but wisdom is found in those who take advice." Notice what pride produces: not healthy discussion, quarrels, conflict for the sake of conflict. The person operating in pride cannot receive counsel, cannot acknowledge another perspective, cannot rest in shared truth. They must dominate every conversation because their identity depends on intellectual superiority. But here is what they do not understand. True wisdom does not need to prove itself. Truth stands without defense. And your refusal to engage in their endless debates is not weakness. It is the evidence of your victory. If you have experienced this relentless need to prove you wrong, you know how exhausting it becomes, how crazy-making, how isolating. You start to question yourself. Maybe I did misunderstand. Maybe I am too sensitive. But here's the truth you need to hear today. Your instincts were right. Their obsession with being correct was never about facts. It was about control. It was about keeping you destabilized, uncertain, dependent on their version of reality. And the moment you stopped seeking their validation, the moment you trusted your own perception, that was the moment you won. So here's what this means for you right now. When they try to pick apart your statements, when they lecture you about what you clearly do not understand, you do not need to defend yourself. You do not need to explain. You do not need to prove anything. Proverbs chapter 26, verse 4 says, "Do not answer a fool according to his folly, or you yourself will be just like him." In other words, you do not have to play a game that was rigged from the start. Your peace is the evidence. Your clarity is the proof. Your refusal to engage is the victory. This obsession with proving you wrong is just the beginning, because when their arguments fail, when their lectures fall on ears that no longer need their approval, they shift tactics. And the second sign becomes unmistakable. They begin an orchestrated campaign to turn others against you. This is not casual gossip. This is strategic, calculated, and relentless. They become consumed with managing how others perceive you, with poisoning wells. You have not even approached yet with building a narrative where they are the victim and you are the villain. You start noticing shifts in relationships you thought were solid. A friend becomes distant. A family member asks pointed questions wrapped in false concern. Someone you barely know seems to have strong opinions about your character, and behind it all, you sense their hand, their voice. Their version of events told with just enough truth to make the lies believable, delivered with just enough emotion to make themselves sympathetic. They sit in coffee shops, tears glistening, voice breaking, telling anyone who will listen how worried they are about you, how you have changed, how you are not yourself, how they have tried everything to help you, but you have pushed them away. They describe your boundaries as cruelty. They frame your silence as abandonment. They paint your healing as evidence of instability. And some people believe them because they are convincing, because they have played this role before. This behavior reveals something profound about their inner world, a deep, unshakable insecurity that cannot tolerate the thought of you living freely, happily, peacefully without them. Your joy becomes intolerable proof that you never needed them the way they needed you to need them. Your growth exposes the stagnation they call stability. Your peace highlights the chaos they call passion. And so they work to isolate you, to damage your reputation, to ensure that even if they cannot control you directly, they can control how others see you. The Apostle Paul understood this dynamic intimately. In 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verses 4 and 5, he wrote, "The weapons we fight with are not the weapons of the world. On the contrary, they have divine power to demolish strongholds. We demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God. Paul recognized that some battles are fought in the realm of narrative, and he knew that divine truth has the power to demolish these carefully constructed lies. Here's what you need to understand. Their campaign against you will fail, not because you defend yourself perfectly, but because truth has a weight that lies cannot sustain. Because people who truly know you will see through the performance. Light always wins. It just does not always win on your preferred timeline. So when you discover they have been working behind the scenes, when you learn about the stories they have told, remember this. Their need to destroy your reputation is direct evidence of your victory. People who are winning do not need to convince others they are winning. People who are at peace do not need to broadcast others' chaos. Their obsession with how others perceive you reveals a truth they cannot hide. You still have power in their world, and that terrifies them. Do not chase down every lie. Do not exhaust yourself trying to correct every misperception. Matthew chapter 5, verse 11 says, "Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you." Jesus himself promised that false accusations would come. Your job is not to control their narrative. Your job is to live in truth so consistently that their lies become obviously hollow to anyone paying attention. Now this brings us to something even more telling. The third sign. A sudden, intense interest in competing with you, not friendly competition. This is a desperate, almost frantic need to outdo you, to match your achievements, to prove they are better, more successful, more admired. Whatever you do, they must do bigger. Whatever you have, they must have better. Whatever milestone you reach, they must reach faster. Let me paint you a picture. You mentioned that your daughter received acceptance to a respected university. There is a brief pause. Then instead of congratulations, you hear a dismissive tone. "Well, you know the school's rankings have been declining. My friend's daughter got into an Ivy League school." The conversation shifts. Your joy deflates. But notice what just happened. They could not celebrate your good news. They had to diminish it, redirect attention, and establish their superiority, all within 30 seconds. Or perhaps it manifests differently. You start a new hobby. Suddenly they are taking classes, buying equipment, posting about their progress. You lose weight. They start a dramatic fitness journey. You find peace. They become suddenly publicly spiritual, sharing scripture, talking about their prayer life. The pattern is unmistakable. Your growth triggers their performance. Your authentic journey becomes a script for their manufactured transformation. This compulsive competition exposes the emptiness at their core. They have no internal sense of worth, no grounded identity, no peace that exists independent of comparison. They are only good if you are worse. They are only successful if you are failing. Your genuine progress becomes a mirror reflecting their hollowness, and they cannot bear to look at that reflection. So they perform. They pretend. But you can feel the desperation underneath, because real growth is quiet. Real transformation is internal. Real peace does not need an audience. Jesus addressed this very issue in Matthew chapter 6, verse 1. Be careful not to practice your righteousness in front of others to be seen by them. If you do, you will have no reward from your Father in heaven. He understood that authentic spiritual growth happens in hidden places, but the person whose identity depends on public perception cannot rest in that hiddenness. They need witnesses. They need applause. They need constant validation that they are winning the game you stop playing. Here is the freedom in recognizing this pattern. Their competition is not about you. It never was. You are simply the measuring stick they are using to avoid measuring themselves against who they were called to be. While you are building a life rooted in authenticity, they are still performing for an audience that has already left the theater. You are free to grow at your own pace, stumble without shame, celebrate small victories without comparison. So when you notice their sudden interest in your hobbies, their need to match your milestones, smile quietly and keep walking. You are not in a race. You are on a journey. And their desperate attempts to prove they are ahead only confirm that you have already arrived at a place they cannot reach. Peace, authentic progress, freedom from the need to perform. But here's where it gets even more revealing. The fourth sign appears in their relationships. They cycle through people rapidly. Friends become enemies. Allies become villains. New supply appears, gets idealized, then gets discarded. And in every case, they are the victim. They are the one who was wronged. You watch from a distance as the pattern repeats. The new friend who is going to finally understand them. That person now has the same complaints you had. The new romantic interest who is their soulmate. That person is now experiencing the same cycles you endured. The family member who was on their side, that person, is now being painted as part of the problem. This revolving door reveals the truth they spend enormous energy hiding. The problem was never you. It was never any of the people they have discarded. The problem is the pattern they bring into every connection, a pattern of impossible standards, moving goalposts, manufactured crises, because no human being can fill the void inside them. No relationship can satisfy the endless hunger for validation. Scripture speaks to this in Proverbs chapter 18, verse 1. An unfriendly person pursues selfish ends and against all sound judgment starts quarrels. Notice what it says, against all sound judgment, meaning the conflict makes no sense. The falling out seems disproportionate because it is. The person operating from this wounded place will find reasons to feel betrayed, will create tests that no one can pass. If you are watching this pattern repeat with others, you might feel validation because you are seeing proof that it was not you. Perhaps sadness because you know what those people are experiencing. This is where your victory requires maturity. You can recognize the pattern without gloating. You can watch the cycle continue without intervening. Because your victory is not about proving you were right. It is about being free. Romans chapter 12, verse 18 says, "If it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone." Notice the qualifiers, if it is possible, as far as it depends on you. Paul understood that some relationships cannot be peaceful because peace requires two people committed to it. Your responsibility is to your part. Their responsibility is their pattern. Now this brings us to the fifth sign. They begin mirroring your healing language, using your words, adopting your boundaries, claiming your insights as their own discoveries. If you talked about therapy, suddenly they are in therapy sharing breakthroughs. If you set boundaries, they are now boundary experts. If you found freedom and faith, they are experiencing a spiritual awakening. And it feels violating because these were your hard-won truths, and they are wearing it like a costume. Think about this carefully. You spent months, maybe years, working through trauma. You sat in counselors' offices, faced painful truths, did the hard work. You read books. You journaled. You prayed through dark nights. You rebuilt your sense of self brick by brick. And now without that work, without that journey, they are using the language of healing as another manipulation tool. They sound enlightened. They appear transformed. But you can sense the hollowness underneath. Because transformation has a weight to it. Real growth changes how someone treats others, not just how they talk about themselves. This mirroring serves a specific purpose. It confuses observers. If you say you had to leave because of their manipulation and they are now talking about overcoming manipulation, People get confused about who is the problem. They are borrowing your credibility, your hard-earned wisdom, and using it as camouflage. But here's what you need to understand. It is actually more evidence of your victory. They would not be mirroring your growth if your growth had not impacted them. They would not be adopting your language if your transformation had not threatened their narrative. Your freedom is so powerful that even they feel compelled to pretend they have found it too. 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verses 13 through 15 gives us language for this. For such people are false apostles, deceitful workers, masquerading as apostles of Christ. And no wonder, for Satan himself masquerades as an angel of light. Paul understood that darkness often disguises itself as light, that deception can wear the costume of truth. But time reveals the difference. And your job is not to unmask them. Your job is to keep walking in authentic transformation. So when you see them using your words, your boundaries feel the brief sting, then release it. They can copy your vocabulary. They cannot copy your journey. They can mimic your transformation. They cannot manufacture your peace. Let them have the words. You have the reality. This leads us directly to the sixth sign. Your absence from their life creates more disruption than your presence ever did. When you were engaged, when you were trying, when you were present, they seemed stable in control. But the moment you stepped back, the moment you went silent, chaos erupted, sudden crises, health emergencies, financial disasters, and somehow mysteriously you hear about all of it. These crises serve a specific function. They are hooks designed to pull you back in, to make you feel guilty, to convince you that your boundaries caused their suffering. But here's what you must see clearly. These crises existed before you left. They were always happening. You were just so busy managing them that you could not see the pattern. You were not preventing their disasters. You were just absorbing the impact. Your absence does not create their chaos. It simply removes the buffer that allowed them to avoid responsibility. When you were present, you were the shock absorber, the problem solver, the emotional regulator, and they came to depend on that, not on you as a person, but on the function you served. So when that function disappears, when the consequences they avoided finally arrive, it feels catastrophic to them. But Scripture is clear about personal responsibility. In Galatians chapter 6, verse 5, Paul writes, "For each one should carry their own load. Not everyone's load, your own." There's a difference between helping someone carry a legitimate burden and becoming the permanent solution to problems they create and refuse to address. You stepping back is not abandonment. It is allowing them to carry what was always theirs to carry. If you are feeling guilt about their crises, hear this. You are not responsible for the consequences of choices you did not make. Jesus himself withdrew from crowds. He went to lonely places to pray. He understood that sometimes the most loving thing is to step back and let people face what they need to face. Your absence is revealing what was always true. They were never as stable as they appeared. You were never as essential as they claimed. So when you hear about their latest crisis, when someone suggests you should reach out, remember, your presence was not preventing their problems. It was preventing their growth. And your absence might be the only thing that ever forces them to seek the help they actually need. Now we come to the seventh sign, their anger, not explosive rage. This is something colder, deeper, a simmering, persistent anger that seems disproportionate, because this anger is not about what is happening now. It is about what happened when you won, when you saw through them, when you stopped believing their version of reality, when you chose yourself, that moment when the game ended and you walked off the field, that is what they cannot forgive. You might see this anger in unexpected places. A social media post that seems directed at no one but you Recognize yourself in every line. A comment to a mutual friend loaded with contempt, a look across a room that holds years of resentment. They are angry because you disrupted their world. You were supposed to keep playing your role. You were supposed to keep doubting yourself, and you stopped. That is the unforgivable sin, not what you did, what you stopped doing. This anger reveals something crucial. In their mind, your healing is an attack. Your boundaries are aggression. Your peace is a judgment on their chaos. They cannot see your journey as separate from their story. Everything you do is about them. So when you choose freedom, they experience it as rejection. When you find joy, they interpret it as your attempt to prove they were wrong. And they are angry because they feel victimized by your victory. But here's the truth that sets you free. Their feelings about your healing are not your responsibility to fix. Ephesians chapter 4, verse 26 says, "In your anger, do not sin. Do not let the sun go down while you are still angry." Notice it does not say, "Do not feel anger." It says, "Do not sin in your anger." Their anger has festered. It controls them. But that is their burden to carry. You cannot manage someone else's emotional life. Consider what Jesus said in John chapter 15, verse 18. "If the world hates you, keep in mind that it hated me first." He promised his followers that living in truth would provoke hatred from those invested in darkness, not because truth is aggressive, because it is exposing. Your freedom exposes their prison. Your healing exposes their wounds. But their hatred does not mean you are wrong. It means you are free. So when you sense their anger, when you feel the weight of their resentment, breathe deeply and know this. Their anger is not about your actions. It is about their inability to control you anymore. You are under no obligation to return to bondage, just to ease their rage. Let them be angry. You are busy building a life they can no longer touch. This brings us to the final and most profound sign. They are terrified of your peace, not annoyed by it, terrified. Because your peace is evidence of something they cannot explain away, something they cannot diminish. You were supposed to be broken. You were supposed to be bitter. You were supposed to be stuck. And instead, you are whole, growing, joyful, free. And it terrifies them because it destroys their narrative. In their story, they were the powerful one, the one in control. Your destruction was supposed to be their proof of power, but you are not destroyed. In their story, they were the one people needed, but you are living without them, thriving even. In their story, they were the blessed one, but your peace radiates a blessing they cannot fake. Your peace is dangerous to them because it cannot be explained by their worldview. They told themselves you were the problem, but you removed yourself and found healing. They told themselves you were weak, but you demonstrated strength they do not possess. They told themselves you would fail, but you are succeeding. Every day you walk in peace is another day their story crumbles. Paul understood this power in Philippians chapter 4, verse 7. "And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus." Notice what he said. This peace transcends understanding. It does not make sense by worldly logic. You should be broken, but you are whole. You should be bitter, but you are free. That peace guards you. It protects you, not by building walls, by radiating a presence that darkness cannot penetrate. Your peace is spiritual armor. So when you notice their subtle attempts to disturb your peace, when they create little dramas, hoping you will react, recognize what is happening. They are testing, searching for a crack in your armor, not because they want you back, because they need to prove to themselves that they still have power over you. And every time you remain at peace, every time you do not react, you win again. Let me be clear. This peace I am describing is not toxic positivity. It is not pretending pain did not happen. This peace is the fruit that grows on the other side of genuine lament, honest grief, hard questions. You have earned this peace through the valley. You have found this freedom by walking through fire. And that is why it is real. That is why it lasts. That is why it terrifies them. Because they can sense the difference between performed peace and possessed peace. They can recognize the texture of something genuine, even if they do not understand how to obtain it. And your genuine peace stands as an invitation they do not know how to accept and a condemnation they cannot escape. As we bring these signs together, as we step back and see the full picture, a truth emerges. Their reactions to your victory are not about you. They are about them, about their fragility, about their emptiness, about their inability to exist in authentic connection. Every sign we have explored points to one reality. You disrupted a system that was never sustainable, and now that system is collapsing. You have walked through the valley of the shadow of death, and you have feared no evil, not because evil was not present, but because you learned to recognize it, name it, and refuse to let it define you. You have sat at a table in the presence of your enemies, not because your enemies disappeared, but because you stopped giving them power over your appetite for life. The Apostle Paul, writing from prison, wrote these words in Philippians chapter 4, verses 12 through 13. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do all this through him who gives me strength. Paul had learned something that transcends circumstances, something that manipulation cannot touch. He had learned that his peace was not dependent on his conditions. You have learned this too. Perhaps you could not have articulated it before, but you learned it. You learned that you do not need their approval to know your worth. You learned that you do not need to defend yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. You learned that you can love people from a distance when closeness costs too much. You learned that boundaries are not punishment, but protection. You learned that walking away is not failure, but wisdom. You learn that your peace matters, and those lessons paid for with tears and sleepless nights, those lessons are yours now. No one can take them from you. Here is what I want you to understand as you move forward. Victory is not a destination where all conflict ends. Victory is a position you occupy even while opposition continues. You have defeated them not because they stopped existing or because they acknowledge what they did. You have defeated them because they no longer have access to your inner world. They cannot make you doubt yourself anymore. They cannot make you question your perception. They cannot pull you back into the game. They cannot disturb the peace you have fought for and won. And here is the beautiful mystery of this kind of victory. It requires nothing from them. You do not need their confession. You do not need their apology. You do not need their acknowledgement. Your freedom is completely independent of their journey. They can stay exactly as they are, and you can still be free. That is the victory, not their destruction. Your liberation. As you go forward, remember that healing is not linear. There will be days when old wounds ache, days when you question your choices, days when guilt whispers that you were too harsh. On those days, return to what you know. Return to the evidence, return to the patterns you recognized, return to the peace you found when you stepped away, and let that truth anchor you again. Remember that your victory does not require their defeat to feel complete. You can hope for their healing even as you maintain every boundary. You can pray for their deliverance even as you refuse to be part of their story anymore. You can wish them well even as you walk away. Because you are not operating from the same spirit they are, you are simply choosing to protect what God has restored in you. You have learned the difference between forgiveness and foolishness, between mercy and martyrdom, between love and enabling. The road ahead is yours to walk, not theirs, not together. And there is grief in that realization, real grief, for the relationship that never was, for the person you hoped they would become, for the years spent trying to love someone who was not capable of receiving love in healthy ways. That grief is valid. Honor it. Feel it. Let it move through you. But do not let it convince you that you made the wrong choice. Because the alternative to the grief of letting go is the slow death of holding on. You are fearfully and wonderfully made. You are more than a conqueror through Him who loves you. You are chosen, set apart, called into light out of darkness. You are free indeed. Not because you are perfect, not because you did everything right, but because you finally did the one thing that mattered most. You chose yourself. You chose truth. You chose freedom. And in that choice, you discovered something they could never teach you. You discovered who you are when you are not defined by their dysfunction, who you become when you are not consumed by their chaos, who you are always meant to be. Because in the end, this was never really about them. It was about you, about your journey, about your healing, about your becoming. They were the obstacle, the test, the trial by fire that refined you. But they were never the point. You are the point. Your freedom is the point. Your peace is the point. Your wholeness is the point. And you have reached it, not because they changed, because you did. Walk forward in the light. Build the life you were always meant to live. Love the people who know how to receive love. Give your energy to those who honor it. Speak your truth to those who have ears to hear. And let your peace, your genuine, hard-won, God-given peace, be the final word on what you survived and who you have become. You have won, not by destroying them, by freeing yourself. And that victory, that beautiful, quiet, unshakable victory, is yours forever. No matter what they do, no matter what they say, no matter how many times they try to pull you back, you have already won. Because the war was never for their surrender, it was for your freedom. And freedom is what you have found.